house there. What are you going to do with that? Some things are going to happen there, which again are going to pull things up in your rule. Let's move to the next slide. The other thing is about the land of Albion, 50 years has moved on, it's got a lot more industrial, Bowerstone has continued to grow, and just like in England and many European cities, that's when poverty really came in. You've now got industrial districts, and those industrial districts is where a lot of poverty, a lot of injustice, a lot of crime takes place. What are you going to do about that? What are you going to do about some fundamental questions in this land? I mean, some of your decisions may well turn this into far more of a utopian place, because we are bringing back and we're doing far more of these things called dynamic regions. The idea that your decisions can change the course of the whole land. I think it was good in Fable 2, but in Fable 3, once you're king, it really starts making sense. If you start overtaxing those regions, then you're going to see a big difference. What are you going to do with your castle? Are you going to build it up? Are you going to develop it? Are you going to expand it? Are you going to spend the hard-earned money on making it more beautiful? Certainly your spouse is going to want you to. Or are you going to let it go to wreck and ruin a little bit and spend the money on the poor? I think, again, those questions are really, 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 really strong. And it's not just Albion this time. A very good portion of this game is set in places that you've never seen before. And I'm not going to say much about this. The only thing is, remember that line, expect the unexpected. Don't expect that you've seen everything of Albion. In fact, Albion is just one small continent in the world of Fable. And we'll be unveiling more of that world in Fable 3 for absolutely for sure. So, there's the story. The next thing is that I'd like to just share with you is some of the efforts that we're going to make this dramatic. Now, Fable 2, I think there were some memorable moments in the Fable 2 story, but I think we were still learning the art of what we were trying to do. And what we really, really want to get to is, and I'm sure every developer says this, we want to make a memorable story. That's what every single developer says. But this time, for me, we really are taking it seriously, and we've taken very new steps, and I'm not sure I've heard of anybody taking similar steps before. So firstly, we've been inspired by a lot of historic events. We've gone through revolutionaries and leaders and kings and queens through history throughout the world. I mean, for example, there's an amazing, incredible tale. If anyone is interested, look up at the tale of what's happened in Oman, in the Middle East, in the last 100 years. It's absolutely fascinating. It almost fits perfectly what we're trying to do. There was these two brothers that were, literally one brother seemed to be, wanting to hold Oman back, and this other brother rebelled and overthrew the older brother. I mean, it was like a story in itself. You really have to look at some plays of Shakespeare to see some great inspiration. Some of the kings and queens in England and France, and indeed in Germany, some of the emperors. I think it's fantastic inspiration. And I tell you what, when you actually start investigating that, the amount of intrigue, backstabbing, just terrible events that went on over the last 1,000 years just in Europe is almost unbelievable. And so, getting that into the drama of the story is really important. But the big problem that games have got, time and time again, especially with something like Fable, it's such a big, huge, massive game full of regions, full of free-flowing game mechanics and freedom for the player. The big problem we have is seeing the story early enough. And in Fable 1 and Fable 2, one of the reasons we didn't quite get to that drama was simply we weren't able to see the story until the game was almost finished. And which is a little bit crazy, really, when you think about it, not being able to hear the voices or see what our performance is like. So what we've been doing is experimenting with a new way of seeing the story earlier. So what we did was we did something called staging. We wrote the story, we did all the scripts of the story, you know, it's a huge, massive story, and then we went to a film studio called Shepperton, where we hired a big sound stage, bigger than this room. We got a whole load of actors and actresses in, and a proper professional director, and we started acting out the entirety of the story. And I want to just share some moments of this with you now, and just say why, as a designer, that is so important. So here we are.
Judgment of this Fairfax Castle servant will now commence.
This is one of the scenes from Fable III. And what was so interesting about this scene is that us as designers and scriptwriters had written it one way, where I was going to give you this character's name and spoil it, but where this character was very much pacing and walking around. But the staging and what some of the ad-libbing that was going on from the actors enabled us to do was to really recast the whole scene. Now, while we're doing this, we have cameras, and these cameras are simulating in-game cameras. We have people like Mark Hill rewriting the dialogue as we go, as we were inspired by this. And we've been doing this for weeks and weeks, trying to get to the heart of this story. And this is very, very important, especially when you think that our story isn't just one thread. It's actually branches and merges, and there's lots of choices, and there's lots of consequences, and we have to get to the centre of that as quickly as we possibly can. And, you know, just being able to see a camera this close, you know, do we want to have this in-game? Do we want to have the ability to get cameras that close? We've got the look-out trigger, if you remember, from Fable II. We can still have that look-out, but that should be a lot more meaningful than it has been before. So all of this staging has taken place. That staging video then goes back to the animators, back to the gameplay scripters. They're inspired to balance around that, and we found that a fantastic inspirational thing. And I think because of this, because again we're using some of the talent, voice talent that you have from Fable II, we're using again in Fable III, we're getting some new voice talent as well. I'm really beginning to get a lot more confident that the story can be truly, truly dramatic. But that's the story side. Let me just touch very, very briefly on a couple of new gameplay mechanics. The first thing I want to talk about is, you know, I know what you're thinking out there, you press people, because you're sneaky people. You're probably thinking, are they actually going to be making RTS then? You know, is when you're king, are you going to be sort of adjusting taxes and sending armies out? No, don't think of that. What we are doing when you're king, we're introducing this new mechanic. And this new mechanic, I'm going to tell you what it is, but I'm not going to tell you exactly how it's implemented. It's something called judgments. Now here's the thing. Being able to be king, you should be able to say, I judge you. I'm going to judge you. I want you to defend yourself against this judgment. And that's what we've got, this totally new game mechanic called judgments. It's the ability for people to come before you if you're in your throne room, or indeed if you're out with the people, to come before you and you say, right, I'm going to judge you now. And they have to